Rain hadn't stopped falling on Portland in 3 days, and Vera Callahan had stopped noticing somewhere around hour 14 of her shift. She stood at the sink in the break room of Cascade Medical Center, both hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold, staring at nothing. The fluorescent light above her buzzed and flickered the way it always did after midnight. Her scrubs smelled like antiseptic and burned coffee, and the circles under her eyes had graduated from tired to something closer to permanent. 12 years of cardiac surgery had taught her how to function on fumes. Single motherhood had taught her how to pretend she wasn't. "You look terrible." Cass Whitmore appeared in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, dark braids pulled back, expression carrying the particular brand of concern that only came from someone who had watched you fall apart before and was trying to calculate how far you were from doing it again. She was the head of emergency medicine and one of the only people in this hospital who spoke to Vera without professional distance. "I'm fine. You said that 4 hours ago. Still true." Cass looked at her for a long moment. "Benny called the nurse's station. He says Lily won't go to sleep until you call her back." Vera closed her eyes. Her daughter, 8 years old, obsessed with dolphins, incapable of sleeping without confirmation that her mother was still alive. "I'll call her in 5 minutes. It's past midnight. She's 8. She functions on a different clock." Vera set down the mug. "I just need another hour and then I'm done." Cass opened her mouth to say something else, then her pager went off. She looked down, and her expression changed the way expressions only change in emergency medicine, from concern to something flat and operational. "GSW incoming, multiple victims. ETA 2 minutes. Vera was already moving. The trauma bay at Cascade didn't sleep. It just pulsed at different intensities. Low hum at 3 p.m., something closer to a scream at 12:17 a.m. when the ambulance bay doors flew open and 2 gurneys came through simultaneously, paramedics calling out blood pressures that made Vera's jaw tighten. She took the first patient. Male, mid-30s, 2 gunshot wounds to the torso, BP dropping. The trauma team assembled around her like a reflex. The second gurney went to another surgeon. Vera didn't look up. She had her own crisis to manage. "Get me a chest tube. Right side. He's got a pneumothorax building." A nurse handed her the instrument. She made the incision without hesitating. "Dr. Callahan." One of the residents, Kyle, said her name with a specific inflection, careful, uncertain, the way people said things they weren't sure they should say. She didn't look up. "Whatever it is, it can wait." "I don't think it can." She looked up. The man on the table had been stabilized enough for her to see his face clearly now. The blood had been wiped back. The oxygen mask covered his nose and mouth. He was unconscious. And Vera Callahan felt the floor tilt sideways. The world didn't stop. The monitors kept beeping. The nurses kept moving. Kyle said something she didn't process. But everything inside her head went completely, terrifyingly silent, because the man bleeding out on her table was Garrett Voss. The man who had kissed her goodbye in a Seattle apartment 8 years ago and never come back. The man who didn't know he had a daughter. She hadn't let herself picture his face in years. Had trained herself out of it the same way. She'd trained herself out of flinching at the smell of his cologne, the particular cut of a dark suit, the sound of his name in other people's mouths. She'd been surgical about it. She was good at surgery. Dr. Callahan. Kyle again. Vera's hands were already reaching for the scalpel. "I'm good," she said. Her voice came out even. She wasn't good. She was standing at the edge of something with no railing, and her hands were steady, and she was going to do her job, because that was the only thing she knew how to do when everything else stopped making sense. She cut. The next 4 hours were technical. She made them technical on purpose, reducing Garrett Voss to anatomy and pressure and suture lines and hemoglobin levels. One bullet had nicked the left lung. Another sat dangerously close to the descending aorta, which should have killed him before the ambulance even loaded him, and hadn't, and that infuriated her in a way she chose not to examine. She worked the way she always worked, like a machine, like someone who did not have a history with this body on this table. By the time she tied off the final suture, her hands were shaking slightly. She stripped off her gloves and walked out of the OR before anyone could see it. The family waiting room on the 3rd floor was empty at this hour. Vera sat in the last chair in the row, farthest from the door, and pressed the back of her head against the wall and breathed. She'd saved him. After 8 years of silence, after all the grief she'd wrapped around herself like armor, after raising his daughter alone through ear infections and bad dreams and the first day of school, and every moment he hadn't been there for, she had stood over his body and put him back together. And she didn't know whether that made her a saint or an idiot. Her phone buzzed. Benny again. She's asking for you. I'm out of stories. Vera typed back. 10 minutes. Tell her 10 minutes. She made herself stand, made herself walk back toward the ICU because she was his surgeon and she needed to check his chart, and that was all this was. That was all this was. He was awake when she pushed open the door. She hadn't expected that, hadn't had time to prepare her face. Garrett lay in the hospital bed with his chest wrapped and his eyes open, and the moment he saw her, every coherent thought appeared to leave his body simultaneously. His mouth opened, closed. His hands gripped the bed rail. Vera, he said. Just that. Like the word was something he'd been holding in his throat for years. You shouldn't be awake yet. Her voice was clinical. She was very focused on keeping it clinical. The anesthesia, I know. He swallowed. I've been drifting in and out. I saw you in the OR. He paused. You saved my life. That's my job. Vera, don't. She moved to the monitor, checked his vitals, wrote something on the chart she didn't need to write. Don't say my name like that. Like we're picking up from somewhere. We're not. He was quiet for a moment. You're right. I know I'm right. I don't have an excuse. I'm not asking for one. I know. That's the part that. He stopped. The monitors beeped. Somewhere down the hall, someone called for a crash cart and Vera's body tensed automatically before the sound moved away. I left because I had to. I know that's not enough. I know 8 years of silence isn't something I can explain in. You're going to strain your stitches, she said. He stopped. She turned around because she had to eventually, because she couldn't keep her back to a post-op patient and call it professionalism. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper, and there was a scar along his jaw that hadn't been there before, and his hair had gone slightly silver at the temples. He looked like someone who had lived somewhere difficult for a long time. She'd wondered sometimes. In the early years, when she was exhausted and scared and trying to figure out how to be a mother to a newborn while also finishing a surgical residency, she'd wondered what had happened to him, whether he was okay, whether he was dead. She'd eventually trained herself out of wondering that too. Why are you in Portland? She asked. He hesitated. I've been here for 3 months. Something cold moved through her. What? I was trying to, but in every time I got close, I couldn't. His jaw tightened. I'm sorry. That's not an excuse either. 3 months. Vera set the chart down very carefully. You've been 3 blocks from where I work for 3 months. Closer than that, he said quietly. I know what coffee shop you go to on Sunday mornings. I know Lily takes the bus home from school on Tuesdays because you have a late rotation. The name hit her like cold water. She went completely still. You know about Lily, she said. It wasn't a question. Garrett closed his eyes. I found out 6 months ago. I hired someone to. I needed to know if you were okay after I left, and they found. He stopped. His hands were gripping the bed rail hard enough that she could see his knuckles. I have a daughter, he said, like the words cost him something. I've been trying to figure out how to. You've known for 6 months. Vera's voice had gone somewhere very quiet, very even. The voice she used when she was telling a family something irreversible. You've been watching us. You've been 2 blocks away, and you've known about her for 6 months, and you haven't. I didn't know how. That's not good enough. I know. She's 8 years old, Garrett. The name came out jagged. She hadn't said his name in years, had refused to, even alone, even in the worst nights of it. She asks me about her father. She asks me why she doesn't have one. She drew him once for a school project, and when her teacher asked who it was, she said, nobody, I made him up. Vera's throat closed for a second. She breathed through it. You've been a block away, and she made you up. Garrett's face did something complicated and broken, and she looked away from it because she couldn't afford to care about what his face was doing right now. Get some rest, she said. I'll check on you in the morning. Vera. She walked out. She called Lily from the parking garage. Her daughter answered, on the first ring with a sound that was half relief and half grievance, which was her default mode after 10 p.m. "I was asleep," Lily said, which was demonstrably false. "You were not almost asleep. That's different." Vera leaned against her car and tipped her head back and stared at the concrete ceiling and tried to find something steady to anchor herself to. Her daughter's voice did it. It always did. How was school? Lily launched into a 10-minute account of a conflict involving the classroom hamster, a broken pencil case, and her best friend Tyler, who had betrayed her in some way that required significant narrative context. Vera listened to every word. She didn't think about Garrett Voss. She didn't think about his hands on the bed rail. She didn't think about 6 months. When Lily finally ran out of steam, she said, "Mama, are you okay?" Vera smiled. Her daughter did this terrible perceptive thing where she stopped mid-sentence and just asked directly. She'd been doing it since she was 4. Vera had never figured out where she learned it. "I'm okay, baby. You sound different." It was a long night. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, in the careful voice she used when she was working up to something, "Can I ask you something? You can always ask me something. Do you think my dad ever thinks about me?" Vera pressed her hand over her mouth. She stood in a parking garage at 1 a.m. with that question sitting in the air between her and her daughter, and she thought about Garrett Voss 3 blocks away in a hospital bed, knowing Lily's school schedule, knowing her coffee order. "I think," Vera said carefully, "that people make choices they regret, and sometimes they don't know how to fix them. That's not really an answer." "No," she agreed. "It's not. Get some sleep. I'll be home by 8. Promise?" "Promise." She sat in her car for 7 minutes before she could make herself drive. She avoided Garrett for 2 days. She assigned his post-op care to a colleague, checked his chart from the nursing station computer, and categorically refused to walk past room 412. She told herself this was appropriate professional distance. She told herself she'd made the right call by walking out. She told herself that his reappearance in her life meant exactly nothing, and she was going to act accordingly. On the 3rd morning, Cass appeared in the doorway of Vera's office with a coffee and an expression that suggested she had been putting off this conversation and had decided to stop. "He's been asking for you," Cass said. "He's not my patient anymore, technically. But he told Dr. Harmon he won't consent to his discharge evaluation unless you do it." Vera looked up from the chart she was pretending to read. "That's not how consent works. He seems to know that and not care." Cass set the coffee on Vera's desk and sat down uninvited. "Do you want to tell me who he is, or do I have to keep pretending I didn't see your face in the trauma bay?" Vera looked at the wall for a moment. Then, "He's someone I used to know, used to love," Cass said, not cruelly, just accurately. "That was a long time ago." "Lily's 8. Vera didn't answer. Cass exhaled slowly. "Vera, he's going to be discharged in 24 hours regardless. What do you want to do with that?" She thought about Lily at the kitchen table the morning before, drawing something in her sketchbook while Benny made pancakes, her dark head bent over the page. She thought about the way Lily sometimes went quiet at school pickup, watching the fathers who came to collect their kids, tracking them with the careful attention of someone cataloging something they didn't have. She thought about her daughter making up a person. "I'll talk to him," she said. He was sitting up in bed when she came in, dressed in a plain gray shirt that someone had brought him, the hospital gown discarded. He looked better than he had 3 days ago, more solid. He looked like the version of him she'd known, slightly worn by years. She closed the door and stood at the foot of the bed. "You wanted to see me?" "I wanted to apologize," he said. "Properly, not from a hospital bed with monitors going off. But apparently this is what I have." He looked at her for a moment. "I was working for a federal task force," he said, "for 6 years before I met you, and for 2 years while we were together. When they pulled me under, I had 48 hours to cut contact with everyone in my civilian life. No explanation, no goodbye." That was the protocol. He paused. "I know that doesn't fix anything." Vera was very quiet. "They told me you were protected, that someone had eyes on you, that you'd be fine." His voice was rough. "I held on to that for 8 years. And 6 months ago, I finally got out, and I hired someone to find you because I needed to know that you were actually," he stopped. She has my mother's eyes, he said. I saw a photo, and she has my mother's eyes. Vera's chest did something that hurt. Why didn't you come to me when you found out? She asked. Because I didn't know if you'd want me to. That should have been shais. Yes. He didn't argue it. It should have been. I spent 6 months being a coward, and then I spent 3 months in Portland being a coward in closer proximity, which isn't better, it's just geographically different. Despite everything, despite the 8 years and the silence and the parking garage conversation with her daughter, she almost laughed. It got caught somewhere in her throat. Her name is Lily, Vera said. Something in his face went very still. She's 8. She likes dolphins and drawing, and she's currently in a feud with a hamster. She takes school very seriously, which she did not get from me. Vera's voice was careful, measured. She doesn't know anything about you. She knows you exist because children understand they come from somewhere, but she's never seen your face. Vera, I'm not finished. She held his gaze. If I let you into her life, it is her life, not yours. She is not a way for you to feel better about the years you missed. She is not a project or a debt you pay off. She is a person, and she is mine. And if you do anything that makes her feel like she matters less than whatever else you have going on, I will end this so fast your head will spin. Garrett looked at her steadily. Understood. She might not like you. I know. She might ask you things that are hard to answer. I expect that. And you don't get to tell her who you really are. Not yet. Not until I know this is. She stopped. Found the word. Safe. He nodded once. I'll think about it, she said. She turned to leave. Vera. She stopped. Thank you, he said, for saving my life. I know you didn't owe me that. She didn't answer. She walked out before the thing in her chest could get any louder. She picked Lily up from school the next afternoon and drove 2 blocks past their apartment before saying casually, I have someone I want you to meet. Lily, who had been mid-sentence about something Tyler had done, paused. Who? An old friend. From before. From Seattle, actually. Vera kept her eyes on the road. Someone I haven't seen in a long time. He's going to be in Portland for a while, and I thought, she stopped, recalibrated. I thought it might be nice for you to meet him. Lily turned this over. She was a precise thinker. She didn't accept vague information without interrogating it. What's his name? Garrett. Is he your friend? He used to be. Lily was quiet for a moment, doing whatever internal calculation she did. Okay, she said finally. They went to the coffee shop on Burnside because it was public and familiar, and Vera needed familiar. She got there first, got a table, and sat with her hands wrapped around a latte and tried to breathe like a normal person. Garrett came in 7 minutes later. He was wearing a dark jacket, walking carefully from the stitches still pulling at his side. When he saw them at the corner table, he stopped for just a moment, long enough for Lily to look up from the hot chocolate she'd been examining and see him. Vera watched her daughter's face. Lily tilted her head slightly to one side, the way she always did when she was looking at something she wanted to figure out. Garrett came to the table and sat down across from them. Hi, he said, and his voice was different from how it was in the hospital, less prepared. More exposed. You must be Lily. You must be Garrett, Lily said. A corner of his mouth moved. Yeah, my mom doesn't talk about her friends from before. Lily was being direct in the way that 8-year-olds could be, which was the kind of direct that bypassed every social courtesy. How come you didn't stay friends? Garrett glanced at Vera. She gave him nothing. I made some choices, he said carefully. That took me away for a long time. And sometimes when you're gone long enough, staying in touch becomes difficult. Lily considered this. Did you try? The question landed in the middle of the table and sat there. Vera watched Garrett absorb it. No, he said. I didn't try hard enough. That's something I regret. Lily seemed to accept this. She turned back to her hot chocolate and said, I'm learning about the Pacific Ocean in science. Did you know orcas can live for 100 years? I didn't know that, Garrett said. Some of them do. She looked up at him. Dolphins are smarter, though, pound for pound. Is that right? Comparatively, their brain-to-body ratio is higher. She said this with complete seriousness. I'm going to be a marine biologist. Vera watched something happen in Garrett's expression. Some tightening, some opening, something that looked uncomfortably like love flooding into a space that had been empty for too long. He spent 40 minutes listening to Lily explain the Pacific Ocean. He asked follow-up questions. He didn't interrupt. He didn't perform interest. He actually seemed interested, leaning forward slightly, nodding, asking about the difference between resident and transient orcapods with a specificity that made Lily's eyes light up with the pleasure of being taken seriously. When it was time to go, Lily slid off her stool and slung her backpack over one shoulder. She looked at Garrett. "Are you going to stay in Portland?" "I'm planning on it," he said. "Then you can come to the aquarium with us," she said. "We go once a month. Mama always says she's going to look at the otters, but then she spends the whole time at the shark tank." Vera cleared her throat. Garrett met her eyes over Lily's head. His were wet, very slightly, in the outer corners. He pressed them shut for just a second. "I'd like that," he said. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in the dark with Lily breathing softly in the next room and stared at the ceiling and tried to construct a rational argument for why this was all going to go wrong. She had a good list. He was a person who had operated in federal gray areas for a decade. He carried things he'd never fully explain. He had walked out of her life without a word and spent 6 months in the vicinity of her daughter before working up the nerve to get shot. That last one wasn't fair. She was aware it wasn't fair. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered out of reflex. Vera Callahan. The voice was male, flat, professional in a way that suggested it had been trained toward professional and had not gotten there naturally. She sat up. "Who is this?" "Someone with information about Garrett Voss." A pause. "Specifically about what he was doing in the weeks before he was shot and who's still looking for him." Every instinct in her body went cold and clear. "How did you get this number?" "We've been watching Dr. Voss since he arrived in Portland. You should know that the people who put 2 bullets in him don't know he's still alive." "But they will. And when they do, who are you?" "Someone who wants the same thing you do," the voice said, "to keep the people around him from becoming collateral damage." The line went dead. Vera stared at her phone. Then she did what she did when things were bad. She thought through it from first principles. Someone knew about her. Knew about Lily, almost certainly. Garrett had said the task force was over, that he was out. He had not said whether everyone who had wanted him dead had received that memo. She called him. He picked up on the second ring. "Someone just called me," she said, and told him what the voice had said. The silence that followed had a quality to it. She recognized that kind of silence, the kind that meant someone was measuring what they could say against what they needed to. "How quickly can you pack a bag?" he said. "Garrett, not permanently. Just, I need you somewhere I can control the environment while I make some calls. You and Lily." His voice was measured, but underneath it she could hear something like fury contained in a very small space. "I'm sorry. I thought I had more time before anyone figured out I was alive. How long have you known this was a possibility?" A pause. "Since I came to Portland. And you didn't think to tell me." "I was trying to." He stopped. "You're right. I should have told you the moment I decided to reach out. I was trying to figure out how to explain it without... I was trying not to scare you before I knew whether we were actually in danger. We are clearly in danger. Yes. So tell me what I need to know. Right now. All of it." He told her. It took 20 minutes. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and listened while he explained the task force, the operation, the people who had funded the criminal network they'd been dismantling, 2 of whom had not been apprehended and had resources that were not limited by geography. He'd been shot because one of them had an informant somewhere in the federal system. He had been in Portland, partially, because Portland was not where anyone would have expected him to go, and partially because of her, which he said plainly, without embellishment. "I need to know something," she said when he was finished. "Anything. Is it over? Is there an end to this, or is this just the life now?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "There are 2 people. After them, there's no one left with the means to care." Another pause. "My contact says they're both being tracked. It's a matter of weeks, possibly less, possibly more." "Possibly more," he agreed. "I won't lie to you about that." She looked at Lily's door across the dark hallway. "I'm not taking her out of the city," Vera said. I'm not uprooting her life and disappearing, because the two of us made bad choices before she was born. I understand, but I'm not ignoring it either. Tell me what you need. A beat, then, quietly. You'd do that? After everything? She has your mother's eyes, Vera said. Whatever you did or didn't do, that's real, and I'm not going to let her lose someone else. Her voice stayed steady through it. She was proud of that. Tell me what you need. What Garrett needed, it turned out, was someone who could think clearly under pressure, which Vera had been doing for 12 years of cardiac surgery and 8 years of solo parenthood. He moved out of the hotel and into the empty apartment above her building that had been vacant since January. Close enough to be useful, not so close it was irreversible. Lily thought this was excellent. She could shout up at his window from the fire escape. You can't teach her to do that, Vera said. She already knows how to do it, Garrett said. She demonstrated while you were on the phone. Vera looked at her daughter, who had the specific expression of someone operating under the assumption that if they looked innocent enough, no one would trace it back to them. Lily. It's a very good fire escape, Lily said seriously. It was strange, having him close. Vera didn't know what to do with it. She'd spent 8 years building a life that had no space for him in it, and now he was a floor above her, coming downstairs in the mornings with coffee because he woke up earlier than both of them and had discovered that her coffee maker required specific handling. He made Lily's lunches on the days Vera had early rotations. He drove her to school once, when Benny was sick and Vera was already scrubbed into a surgery, and Lily came home that afternoon and said, "He knows a lot about boats," with the tone of someone who had been genuinely surprised. Vera was careful. She watched him with Lily the way she watched everything she wasn't sure about, closely, for inconsistencies, for the place where the performance would crack and the real thing would show through. The performance never cracked, because it wasn't a performance. She saw it in pieces. The way he sat on the floor with Lily and helped her build something elaborate and structurally unsound out of blocks, and when it fell, he didn't manufacture enthusiasm about it. He just said structural failure in a tone of mild scientific interest, and they started over. The way he remembered things, Lily said, small things, passing things, the name of her hamster conflict enemy, the book she'd recommended to him the week before that he had actually read. The way he looked at her sometimes when Lily was focused on something else, and there was just loss in his face, plain and unguarded. 8 years of missed mornings compressed into one expression. She was watching him look like that one evening when he caught her watching. He didn't look away. Neither did she. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for everything. I know I've said it, but I don't think it covers what I actually mean." "What do you actually mean?" He looked at Lily, who was asleep on the couch, with one foot dangling off the cushion and a book open on her chest. "I mean, I missed 8 years of her. I mean, I missed 8 years of you. I mean, I had reasons that were real, and the reasons being real didn't make any of it okay, and I know that, and I don't know what to do with it, except show up now and try not to waste what's left." Vera was quiet for a moment. "She's going to ask you," she said, "eventually. She's going to figure it out, and she's going to ask you directly, and when she does, you have to tell her the truth. I know, not the task force truth, the human truth, and you were scared and you were a coward about it. That part she needs to hear." Garrett nodded. "I know. I mean it. She doesn't get a filtered version." "I know, Vera." She looked at him. "Then you can stay." 3 weeks later, the phone calls started again, and this time they came with something concrete. 2 men from the network Garrett had helped dismantle had crossed the border into Washington and were moving south. Garrett's federal contact, a woman named Price, who communicated in clipped sentences and showed up at Vera's apartment door in business casual, like she was attending a budget meeting rather than a crisis, told them both plainly that they had a 48-hour window. "I need you and Lily somewhere with security," Garrett said. "I'm not running. I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to be somewhere that isn't your apartment while you do what?" He looked at her steadily. "While I finish this." Vera sat with that. Price was watching her from the kitchen doorway, with the expression of someone accustomed to civilians needing a moment to catch up. "Lily goes to my colleague's house," Vera said finally. She likes Cass. She's been there before. It won't seem like anything unusual. I tell her it's a sleepover. She paused. I stays. Vera, you told me this was weeks. You told me it's 2 people. You told me after that it was over. She held his gaze. I'm holding you to that. But I'm not sitting in a hotel room waiting to hear if you're dead. I did that once for 8 years without even knowing that was what I was doing. Her voice stayed even. I stay. I'm in the loop. Or I'm taking Lily to my mother's in Oregon City and I'm not answering my phone. Garrett looked at Price. Price said, she's useful in a crisis. I saw her chart from the night he came in. That's a different kind of useful, he said. Most kinds of useful are. It was over in 36 hours. Vera didn't see the operational part of it. Price had been firm about that, and Vera had decided that particular argument wasn't the hill she'd die on. She waited in her apartment with Cass, who had come back after dropping Lily off and made tea and sat in the armchair and refused to go home because she was that kind of person. When Garrett walked through her door at 2 in the morning, he was intact, which was the first thing she checked. He had a cut above his eyebrow that had been taped rather than stitched, and he moved like someone whose stitches from 3 weeks ago were talking back to him, but he was upright and present, and when he saw her standing in the kitchen, his whole face changed. Cass picked up her coat from the chair without being asked. I'll see myself out, she said. She did. Vera looked at Garrett. It's done, he said. She let out a breath she'd been holding for 3 weeks. He crossed the kitchen. He stopped in front of her. He didn't move to touch her. Just stood there, close enough that she could see the tiredness in his face and the thing underneath it, the thing that had been building, since the night she'd looked up from an operating table and found his face. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, he said. That's been established. But I'm asking anyway. His voice was quiet. Not for me. For whatever is still possible, if any of it is. Vera looked at him for a long time, at the person who had walked out of her life and come back carrying years she'd never see, at the father who had been learning his daughter's entire personality from scratch in 3 weeks and couldn't be faking the way he looked at her. She's going to want a dog, Vera said. He blinked. What? When she finds out you're her father, which is going to happen soon, because she is 8 years old and not oblivious, she is going to leverage it. She's wanted a dog for 2 years, and I've been saying no because our building doesn't allow them. You, presumably, don't have that restriction. Garrett was very still. I can get a dog. If you get her a dog to compensate for 8 years, I will. I know. Something moved in his face. I'll get her a fish. We'll work up to it honestly. Vera almost smiled. She negotiates, he agreed, and there was something in his voice that sounded like pride, which she decided not to address tonight. Stay, she said. Not here, not yet. But stay in Portland. Stay on the fire escape where she can shout at you. Show up for things. Do the boring parts, not just the good ones. I can do that. And when she asks you the hard question, I'll tell her the truth. He said it simply. Absolutely. I'll tell her I was a coward and I'm not proud of it, and she deserved better than what she got, and I can't give her the years back, but I'm not leaving again. Vera nodded. She reached out and straightened the tape on the cut above his eyebrow because she was a surgeon and improperly taped wounds bothered her, and he went completely still under her hands. Don't make me regret this, she said. I won't. She believed him, which was, she thought, its own kind of terrifying. But she was a surgeon. She had spent 12 years doing terrifying things with steady hands. She could manage this. Lily figured it out on a Thursday, which was not the dramatic moment Vera had been quietly preparing for. It was just a Thursday. Lily came home from school, dropped her backpack on the floor, in the specific place Vera had asked her 100 times not to drop it, and walked into the kitchen where Vera was making dinner, and Garrett was sitting at the table with his laptop open, which had become its own specific kind of ordinary. Lily stood in the kitchen doorway. She looked at Vera. She looked at Garrett. She looked at Vera again. He has my eyes, she said. Vera's spoon stopped moving. Garrett looked up from his laptop. Or I have his, Lily said, with the tone of someone working through a logic problem. Biologically, that's probably more accurate. The kitchen was quiet. Lily, Vera started. He's my dad, Lily said. Not a question. Not even an accusation. just the conclusion of a sequence, stated plainly, because that was how Lily processed things. Vera set down the spoon. Garrett closed his laptop. He looked at Lily with an expression that had nothing performed in it, just the raw thing, the unmanaged thing, the face of someone who had been waiting for this and found that waiting for it had not prepared him at all. "Yeah," he said. "I am." Lily walked to the table and sat down across from him. She folded her hands in front of her in the particular way she had, very deliberate, like she was calling a meeting. "You knew about me for a long time," she said. 6 months before we met." "Yes. Why didn't you come sooner?" He didn't flinch from it. "Because I was scared. Because I didn't know if you'd want to know me. Because I made it about my fear instead of about you, and that was wrong." Lily considered this for a moment. "Did you want me?" she asked. The question was quiet, 8 years old, and entirely precise. Garrett's face did something that took a moment to resolve. "I didn't know you existed," he said. "But if I had, yes. Absolutely yes, without a single second of hesitation." Lily looked at him for a long moment with those eyes that were his mother's eyes and her mother's steadiness. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay? You can stay." She said it with the authority of someone who had been running her own household in various ways for most of her conscious life. "But I have some rules." Despite everything, despite the 8 years and the fear and the cut above his eyebrow and the 36 hours she'd spent waiting, Vera started to laugh. She pressed her hand over her mouth and laughed until her eyes were wet, and Lily looked at her with the patient expression of someone accustomed to adults finding things funny at inappropriate moments. Garrett looked at Lily very seriously. "Tell me the rules," he said. The story didn't end there. Stories like this never do, not cleanly. There were hard conversations and awkward Sunday mornings, and at least one occasion when Lily, testing limits, tested them hard, and Garrett had to figure out how to hold a boundary with a child who had never had that particular person set one before. There was the day she introduced him to Tyler from school as my dad, with a casualness that broke 2 people's hearts simultaneously. There was the night she had a nightmare and walked past Vera's room and knocked on Garrett's door instead. And when Vera found them in the morning, Lily was asleep in the armchair in his apartment, and he was on the couch with a book, having apparently decided that moving her back might wake her, and that sleeping upright in an armchair was a suitable alternative. "You're going to have a terrible back," Vera said from the doorway. She was scared, he said simply, like that was all the explanation anything needed. It mostly was. They got the fish. 6 months later, after sustained negotiation, they got a dog, an elderly beagle with philosophical eyes and a calm temperament that Lily named Pacific on account of the ocean, and that Garrett took on his morning runs with the patience of someone who had realized that the beagle moved at its own speed, and that was fine. Vera watched them from the kitchen window one morning. Garrett and Lily and Pacific in the street below, Lily pointing at something, Garrett crouching down to look at whatever it was with his full attention, the beagle sitting beside them with the expression of someone who had seen enough of the world to not be impressed by most of it. She had spent 8 years building a life that fit exactly 2. She was still building. The shape of it had changed. She thought about what she'd said to Lily months ago in the car. People make choices they regret. Sometimes they don't know how to fix them. She was starting to think some of them figured it out. The coffee she was holding had gone warm. She drank it anyway. Out on the street, Lily said something that made Garrett laugh. Fully, unguarded, the laugh of someone who had stopped being careful about what he showed, and Vera thought, okay, this is the thing worth protecting. She had survived the operating room and the parking garage and the 36 hours of not knowing, and every ordinary terrifying moment in between. She could survive being happy.